The Ravens take care of business in a game that many are considering to be a potential Game of the Year candidate. We talk all about the Ravens and Bengals game. We touch on the next chapter in the Battle of the Beltway when the Ravens host the Commanders in the Week 6 matchup that has a lot of fans very excited. We talk about it next on Ravens Talk. Lamar Jackson continued to do what he does best. Let's beat the Cincinnati Bengals. Took a little more work than usual, but he gets the job done all the same. Welcome to Ravens Talk. I'm your host, Samuel Njoku. As you mentioned, the Ravens defeat the Bengals in a thriller. Overtime kick by Justin Tucker gets it done, and the Ravens move to 3-2 in preparation of hosting the Washington Commanders, led by one Jaden Daniels. In this episode, we'll talk about that Bengals game. We'll talk about the Jaden Daniels versus Lamar Jackson matchup as the Commanders come to Baltimore in the Battle of the Beltway. But first, Ravens do what we expect them to do on offense. Finally, they've changed the way they play the game. They adapt to what the Bengals do. We talked about it last week. The Bengals were not equipped to handle the Ravens. And the Bengals seem to have known that, and they sold their soul to stop Derrick Henry, and it worked. The only problem is they forgot about one guy, Superman. Number 8, Lamar Jackson. He put on his cape, and he went to work. I mean, he went to town on this Bengals team. Joe Burrow also had a great game against the defense. We'll talk about that in a second, but Lamar Jackson for sure led the way with 4 touchdowns. Pretty much was unstoppable. The Bengals tried everything to get him down, but did not want to give him an out with the run game, so they kept the pressure on, kept the guys in the box, kept Derrick Henry at bay, and it worked for a long time. Joe Burrow kept wheeling, dealing, making sure that the Ravens didn't have the confidence to lean on the run game even more, and it all came to a head when a few turnovers by both sides swung the momentum. First, a Joe Burrow interception by Marlon Humphrey to give the Ravens a chance to take the lead and get the win. Ravens had to settle for the field goal instead, head to overtime. A little more back and forth. Lamar Jackson gets the ball back after the Bengals missed their kick to win the game. Handed off to Derrick Henry, and that's all she wrote. 50-plus yards on the run. Stopped short of the goal line by Geno Stone and the old reliable Justin Tucker. And I use that in quotation marks because he has struggled a little bit, but any way to redeem yourself, there's no better way to do it than against a division foe at home. Pick up the win 41-38, and the Ravens now move tied with first place with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Browns and the Bengals sit at 1-4 in the bottom of the division. Whew, what a game. What a game. A lot of things that I liked in that game, and I'm sure Ravens fans are much aware of it. The Ravens leaned on the pass. Something pundits, analysts over there outside of the city of Baltimore talked about ad nauseum. Can the Ravens come from behind and win the game? Well, the Ravens were 10 points down against a high-powered offense like the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Ravens were able to keep up, keep pace, not let the game get away from them too much, and they got their job done. So shout-outs to Todd Monken, who's now being hailed as a potential head coaching candidate due to his performance. The Ravens have the number 1 offense in all of football, something that has never been uttered out of anyone's mouths ever. So shout outs to the Ravens for getting it done. They're doing it through the ground and the air. I mean, that's just a very well put together offense so far this season. Lamar Jackson, early claim for that 3rd MVP trophy. A lot of people, a lot of my friends even who aren't Ravens fans have talked about how, Lamar Jackson won 2, but he's not going to win a 3rd one. Well, if not him, then who right now? He looked very, very good. And Ravens fans, I'm sure, are very happy that number 8 is wearing purple and black. The offense played well, but not so much the defense. I mean, Joe Burrow went kind of crazy. I mean, that's a good way to put it. Lamar Jackson had a great game. A case can be made that Joe Burrow had an even better game. We'll be talking about Joe Burrow a lot this week if the Ravens hadn't picked up the win. 5 touchdowns, almost 400 yards passing against the Ravens defense. I mean, could you ever even conceive that to be a possibility at the start of the season? The way that we were talking about this Ravens defense, the defensive backs of this Ravens team have to be overwhelmed with disappointment because they were unable to stop both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Chase almost had 200 yards and 2 touchdowns himself. It was just a very poor performance by this DB group. And the game plan was clear by Zach Orr. I mean, they were going to be bend or don't break for 4 quarters. They were not going to let Joe Burrow beat them. Joe Burrow was patient, and he took his opportunities when possible. There are some situations where Zach Orr tried to fool Joe Burrow, and that's when Joe Burrow would strike. I can remember a couple of touchdown passes to T. Higgins, red zone targets where the Ravens tried to keep Roquan Smith in the red zone, not the red zone, the line of scrimmage, and he moved out into zone at the snap of the ball. But, keeping 3 guys at the left side of the offense and only having 2 DBs there to block it or to defend it gives Joe Burrow the idea that there's going to be opportunity for success here. Joe Burrow didn't miss a beat. There was no fooling Joe Burrow. It was just 2 world-class, S-class quarterbacks that play here with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. Someone had to lose. Unfortunately for Bengals fans, it was the Bengals, but this was a tightly contested matchup where no matter what defense you had on that field, you were not going to stop these guys. They were on a mission. It came down to who made the mistake. Joe Burrow made one. Lamar made one when he dropped the ball and caused a fumble. And the missed kick by McPherson on the Bengals side was the nail in the coffin for the Bengals. You give a team, a defense who's been running after Lamar Jackson for 60 minutes, you put them back on the line of scrimmage against Derrick Henry, fresh legs, hasn't really seen action since the first half, and you're going to get a 50-yard bomb of a run down your throats, and that's pretty much sealed the game. For the Ravens, obviously, getting inside to the 10-yard line on the opposing defense, I should say. And the Ravens win. So shout out to the Ravens. They get the job done. Of course, you'd love for the defense to play better. Of course, you don't hope this goes to overtime against a Bengals defense with a lot to be desired. A Bengals team who's currently 1-4. But good teams find ways to win games, and bad teams find ways to lose games. The Bengals, even though the offense is very potent, considers themselves to be a bad team because you are what your record are. 1-4. The Ravens move on to 3-2. A team that was grasping for straws at 0-2. To statistics about how many teams that go 0-2 make the playoffs, how many teams that go 0-3 make the playoffs. Now we're looking at the team tied for first in the division with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who looked pedestrian against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday night. Of course, their defense is still optimal, but all signs point to potentially another Ravens division title. It's early. A lot of things can happen between now and January, but Ravens look really good. Really good. And the rest of the division looks not so great. So lots of games left to be played. We'll talk about it a little bit later. When we get back, we'll start talking about the Ravens and Commanders because I've seen a lot of talk from Commanders fans, and I get that, and we'll touch on it. We'll touch on why the Commanders fan base and being excited and active is a good thing for the Ravens and the Commanders. And we'll touch on it next on Ravens Talk. Welcome back to Ravens Talk. We talked about it. The Ravens and the Commanders going head-to-head. Week 6, Jaden Daniels versus Lamar Jackson. Jaden Daniels, a rookie, but he certainly isn't playing like one. I mean, he has had great moments. I think the one moment that many people are probably thinking about are the Commanders going head-to-head with the Bengals on Monday Night Football. And what another shootout that was for the Bengals, who, as we saw on Sunday, have not the greatest defense in the world. So good thing for the Commanders fans to see a quarterback finally come to fruition. They haven't really been excited for football since RG3 was their quarterback, and we saw how the Commanders dealt with having a QB the likes of RG3. So now that there's new ownership there, and the front office has been makeshifted, and there seems to be stability there, that franchise seems to be headed in the right direction. And Commanders fans are very excited. I mean, they sit here 4-1, tops in their division, obviously, and going head-to-head against a team 45 minutes away who has pretty much stolen the spotlight in the state of Maryland and the DMV as a whole. So seems to be a little bit of contention between these two teams heading into Week 6. I've gone on social media, has said my piece so far about what I liked and what I disliked about the matchup in terms of the Ravens. And the Commanders weren't having that. The fans weren't, at least. And it's very fun to see. I told Ravens fans, just enjoy this, or let them enjoy this, because can you imagine being a Commanders fan all these years? The Commanders haven't won a Super Bowl championship since God knows when. You know, having the Ravens win 2 in recent memory, having the success of Joe Flacco, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, now Lamar Jackson, finally having a quarterback that, you know, pundits around the world consider to be a top-tier QB. Now, your next test is against a team that many are considering to be one of the favorites to win the championship. You're going to get some talk back. So I say take this with a grain of salt if you're a Ravens fan. Enjoy the back and forth, talk to them, you know, school them how it is, you know, to be a top-tier team, and they have earned the right to be considered a top-tier team. Whether or not they come up to, you know, the snuff, come to the standards that the Ravens have imposed upon themselves, we'll soon find out. But as far as being a fan, enjoy it, because you don't get this a lot. Ravens and Commanders have never been two teams that have been, you know, very good at this stage of the game. So shout outs to the Commanders out there. Enough of the fluff. Let's get into the game, what I like and what I dislike about this matchup. Let's start with the offense of the Ravens. Do they match up well against the Commanders? Yes. Maybe even more so than against the Bengals. I mean, the Commanders do some things well, kinda, but a lot of things they do does not match up well with what the Ravens do. For starters, the Commanders play a light box. I mean, their light box rate is through the roof. Last week, it was about 70%. It dwindled down to about 68%. That's still good for third in the league. So they run the light box 68% of the time. And if you're not a guru of football, light box basically means having less guys in the box than usually necessary to stop the run. So they keep 6 or 7 guys in the box at all times. They're not used to having 8 guys in the box. They don't scheme for that. So having a team like the Ravens, who are very heavy set running team, it's going to be problems. It's going to cause problems for the Commanders, and they're going to need to find ways to buck the trend, go away from what they're good at to try to stop this offense that has been, for all things considered, unstoppable through the first 5 weeks of the season. So Commanders do have a lot of problems in that regard. The blitz rate's probably around 12th or 13th. I think actually it's 12th in the league, so they do blitz quite a bit more than the Ravens, but their pressuring of the quarterback as far as the success rate in pressuring the quarterback is a little bit lower than what the Ravens do, and the Ravens don't blitz as much. So that tells me that they're not really having that much success getting to the quarterback, even when they're blitzing. So it's going to be tough against the Lamar Jackson, who, you know, he does well against the blitz. I think the Bengals blitzed 43% of the time last week, which is well above the average that the Commanders blitzed the ball, and Lamar was still able to have amazing success. I think he threw two touchdowns against the blitz on Sunday. So even if you're deciding to blitz Lamar Jackson, there's going to be problems. Blitzing does help with the run. A lot of fans don't realize that. Blitzing is also good for stopping the run, but the run defense of the Commanders is poor. So I think that the Commanders will take the same approach as the Bengals. They're going to probably have to sell their soul to stop the run, because if they get the run game going, and even though Jaden Daniels is the rookie, their best chance of winning this game is to make sure Jaden Daniels has as many opportunities to get the ball in the end zone as possible. If you have a run game that's dominant, keeping him off the field, giving the Commanders a limited amount of opportunities to get that ball in the end zone just favors the Ravens so much. It's kind of nuts when you think about it. So the Bengals took their approach of selling their soul to stop the run, and that created opportunities for Joe Burrow, who, even though Jaden Daniels is, you know, looks like going to be a good QB. He's going to be a great quarterback eventually, but he's not up to the standards of Joe Burrow yet. He doesn't even have the weapons that Joe Burrow possesses, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But it's going to be tough for the Commanders to do it. I mean, maybe the Commanders are able to find a way to take advantage of the interior line of the Ravens, who at the beginning of the season struggled. Not so much now, but certainly there's a potential look there that the Commanders could do something to dismantle the unit that the Ravens have brought out. The 5 guys, having Patrick McCarry at left guard has helped, as Andrew Voorhees did struggle a bit. Ronnie Stanley didn't practice on Wednesday. We expect him to play. Having Daniel Falele in the right guard, he seems to have caught on. He's a big guy, so even if you have big interior linemen, which the Commanders do possess, having a guy like Falele does present challenges for that defensive front, and that's kind of crazy to say, considering where we were at after that Chiefs game. So shout outs to Falele, and Rosengarten obviously has stepped up in the big way for the Ravens too. So definitely favoring the Ravens on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think I need to touch on it any further, especially with the way Lamar Jackson played. This team is primed for success, and you need to play defense a specific way and have familiarity against this team to get it done. And we know that the Ravens have great success against NFC teams. In fact, Lamar Jackson was only lost to one NFC team ever as a starting quarterback, and that was the Giants. So it's going to be tough sledding for the Commanders. And we know at home the Ravens are 15-2 against rookie QBs. All of that points to a successful outing for the Ravens offense. You got to play the game. But I'm stating to you what the matchups look like as far as what the Ravens possess against those Commanders. On the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens, yuck. That's the best way I could put it. Yuck. It was gross. It was gross to watch. The film was yucky. The Ravens brought in Dean Pease to be their advisor alongside Zachary Rohr. Something I think they should have done early in the season, you'd think, to help him out. Zachary Rohr's defense, I think they're ranked 30th now in pass defense. Definitely struggled against Joe Burrow. The game plan was obvious to play back and not let them beat you deep. The Ravens still got beat deep. They caught the safeties out of position sometimes. Sometimes the corners were too far back and they were relying too much on the secondary of their defense, the second level of their defense, I should say, meaning the linebackers, to wreak havoc and confuse Joe Burrow. It just did not work. Whatever they do with Joe Burrow, it did not work. Whether it works against Jaden Daniels, we'll see. I tend to believe that they'll have a little more success against Jaden Daniels than Joe Burrow because they do not have to scheme their way into keeping Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at bay. Terry McLaurin is a great receiver. They got Scary Terry out there, fine. But outside of that, they don't really have too much that the Ravens had to deal with. Of course, those receivers can ball out on any given Sunday or what have you. But as far as what I've seen on film and what I've seen in the past, the Ravens should have an easier time containing those receivers than they would against the Bengals. And I would expect this to be closely related to the Bills game in which the Ravens locked the receivers up for the Bills and forced Joe Burrow to make those tight throws than you were against the Bengals, where they were like, okay, we'll give you some open receivers, but we're going to scheme into you thinking you have time. Give you second and third chances to think about your opportunities before you throw the ball. Ravens got at Joe Burrow. They had guys in his face, but he was just lights out. So shout outs to the Bengals once again and Joe Burrow. Maybe Jaden Daniels has that dog in him. Maybe he does, but this offense of the Commanders doesn't seem to be that type of offense. They do lean on their running game a little more than the Bengals do, even though the Bengals do have a good running game. They may have to, especially if the Ravens get off to an early lead, rely on Jaden Daniels a little more. Not saying he's not capable of doing that. And we've seen him have success against the Bengals on Monday Night Football, like we mentioned. And the Ravens have given up yardage. I mean, you are what your stats say you are. I mean, you're 30th in pass defense. That means you're 30th in pass defense. No fluff about it. There are circumstances that lead to that, and the talent is there for them to turn it around. But right now, I'm not going to sit here and say the Commanders have no shot at throwing the ball on the Ravens. I mean, we've seen Gardner Minshew have success. Patrick Mahomes, I know a guy who, he's Patrick Mahomes. The name speaks for himself. Have success. Dak Prescott, success. Josh Allen didn't have as much success, but Joe Burrow came back the next week and had the most success you can possibly have in 60 minutes plus of football. So Jaden Daniels has an opportunity. The Commanders definitely see an avenue to success. I just don't see it being as simple as it was against the Bengals. They will not see the same looks that the Ravens gave them. The Ravens gave the Bengals entirely too much respect. I think you saw at the end of the game, I'm almost positive that the DBs came up to Zachary Rohr and said, listen, enough. We're going to lock them down. If they beat us, but we're not going to just give them the game. And that's what the Ravens are doing for the first 4 quarters of the game until overtime. Maybe a little bit before overtime, the Ravens switched it up and became a little more aggressive in their alignment. So I expect to see more of that against the Commanders. I don't think the Ravens will give the Commanders that much respect. And it could be a shootout. I mean, it could be, but I just don't think it'll be that type of game for the Ravens defense. Not to say that the Ravens are going to be back to what they were last year. I just expect the Ravens to be much better than they showed on Sunday. When we come back, we'll have Ryan from the Flock Rundown. A lot of you guys may know him. If you're a Ravens fan who uses YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever to get your daily news like you get from the Ravens Talk podcast, then you're familiar with Ryan's work. But we'll get him in to talk about the Ravens game against the Bengals and his thoughts on the upcoming matchup with the Commanders next on Ravens Talk. Welcome back to Ravens Talk. And as we mentioned, we have Ryan from the Flock Rundown joining the podcast. Welcome, man.
What's up, Sam? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, big pleasure to have you on. Longtime fan, so great to have you on the show finally. And you came at a good time. The Ravens have been surging. They won 3 straight games. Last game against the Cincinnati Bengals, a thriller, some may say, game of the year potentially. Give us your thoughts about what was going through your mind as the game was progressing, and your final thoughts on it.
A lot of stress. No, it was an exciting game. I mean, I would say throughout the game, I'm honestly thinking we're gonna lose because the secondary just couldn't stop anything. Shout out to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. They were on a different level, but so just the back and forth was making me feel like we weren't going to lose, but the offense impressed me, man. Just the fact that they were able to answer, the fact that they were able to switch styles. I think that was like the biggest question early in the season was, are we able, if the run game does get slowed down, it's going to be hard for anybody to shut the run game down, but if it does get slowed down, if teams are bringing a lot of people in the box and making it a lot harder for us to do what we want to do, are we able to switch styles and go up tempo and just throw it in through the air? And obviously we proved that. I know Lamar was capable of that, but it was just nice to see that play out in front of us. And now I have a lot more confidence that we can really be multiple and kind of attack. And shout out to Todd Monken too. I felt like a lot of his answers against that blitz were necessary, were crucial. We haven't in the past always had great answers to teams doing that to us. So that was really nice to see. I would say I left very encouraged on the offensive side of the ball. And then the defensive side of the ball, I'm not discouraged. It's just, frustrating to watch the secondary just completely get torched drive after drive. But I think that we'll correct that moving forward. I don't think that that's a huge issue. We have a lot of talent back there. I don't even think it's really a scheme issue. And shout out to the Ravens and Zach Orr for bringing in Dean Pease today too. I think that'll help get a experienced mind in the room. So no, I'm feeling good after the Bengals game. It definitely was a stressful game, but the fact that we pulled it out at the end makes it well worth it, and a game that I'll enjoy the highlights for forever probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Ravens Bengals highlight that is most familiar to me is when Lamar Jackson did that spin move and ran up the field during his early years, and now he has a whole new game to look at. That was a
same commentator,
game.
Right? Called both
same
plays.
Commentator.
Yeah.
And if you notice in the middle of the game, he kind of did a spin move, and you thought, is this going to be another run for a touchdown? So that was
he's got those catchphrases, man, like the Houdini or he threw him like a rag doll. Just like he's on it.
He's top tier. I love Harlan. He's a go-to guy. One of the guys I don't mute when I'm watching the game for sure. You mentioned the Ravens being multifaceted now, and that's a shift from Greg Roman to Todd Monken. I think we saw a little more Greg Roman throughout the years, but especially early on this season, you didn't really have a need for the Ravens to become this passing attack. Now you're starting to see Todd Monken implement his way into the offense, and you're starting to see some things from him that make you believe, okay, this is the reason why the Ravens brought him in. And now he's been talked about as a potential head coaching candidate early on. What are your thoughts on that? The Ravens lost to DC and Mike McDonald. They keep Todd Monken this year, and maybe next year he's gone.
The league loves to pluck our coordinators. I mean, we lost, half the defensive staff this offseason, it feels like. No, it's cool. I mean, it's cool. I think it's a compliment that he's mentioned in conversations. I honestly, at this point, don't see him being like a huge threat to become a head coach, but you never know, I mean, especially if we have an absolutely dominant offensive year, somebody might get desperate and be like, that's our guy, but I just think being a coordinator and is such a different role than being a head coach. I know that teams love to hire genius offensive minds, and that's a trend for sure. McVay kind of started that really, and I know I understand that thought process, but there's a difference between like a guy who can rally the locker room and keep everybody together and be the CEO of the entire operation compared to a guy who's just scheming the offense, sitting up in the booth. So I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen him be a head coach, so I guess he could be a great one, but I would just lean towards this being he's on a name of lists that people are going to be talking about because the Ravens offense is playing really well.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. It's a compliment to the team that he's being mentioned. They got the number 1 ranked offense in the National Football League, and you mentioned it as the offensive league. So, of course, his name is going to be mentioned. But I agree with you. I think it's very different being the OC or DC than being the head coach. You see it a lot of Ravens fans very much spoiled with having a John Harbaugh, not really knowing how it feels to have somebody who's one way offensive, defensive minded to coming in and having to bring other coaches in to alleviate that on their side of the ball. So
and establishing a new culture too, like that's such a big deal. The Ravens, I think, more than anything, I know a lot of Harbaugh gets a lot of heat and deservingly so in some conversations. He definitely makes some airheaded decisions, but but like we can't argue the fact that he's like helped establish or continue at least a Ravens culture that's carried for well over a decade now. And I think that is important, and that's not so easy to replace. You can't just bring in the next guy. The Ravens are barely hiring head coaches. It doesn't mean that another team can't take a chance on Monken. I just think that it's hard to establish that culture like the Ravens have built with Harbaugh.
Yeah, I've been talking about it for years. I've been a Harbaugh guy. I was a little vocal about his decision-making with the offensive line this season. That's the first time I've ever really been negative towards him. But he's still, in my opinion, top 5 in the league in terms of being the head coach. And you're starting to see what that means with him pulling himself out of an 0-2 hole. And now he's tied for first place in the AFC North. You mentioned Zachary Orr. He brought in Dean Pease, a guy Ravens fans are very familiar with. His style differs a little bit from Zachary Orr, but to have a guy with experience coming in, and we talked about it all offseason, Zachary Orr hasn't called plays in any level of the football world in general. I mean, high school, college, NFL. So to have a guy come in with experience, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think that will mesh well together and you potentially see this working in the Ravens' favor?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a positive. I don't really even see a potential negative. I don't think we're going to reinvent our defensive scheme. This has been a scheme that's been building for a long time now, and Dean Pease and Wink Martindale and McDonald and everyone's just contributed to this evolution of this defense anyway. So I don't see any like crazy scheme changes, but I think it's just all beneficial to have such an experienced mind. I mean, Zach Orr is 32, I think, and then Dean Pease is like 75 and has been around football his whole life. I mean, that is drastic. That is irreplaceable. That experience that he has, that knowledge he has through different evolutions of the NFL over the years, and he's kind of seen it all. And I think just for Zach Orr to bounce ideas off of somebody and, just have him watch film with and whatever. I know he's in some senior advisory role. I don't know exactly what the ins and outs of that look like, but I just think having that experienced mind in the room to assist is just purely beneficial. I think that's definitely going to help us. And it's going to speed up. I definitely don't think the defense is like going to stay, or at least the secondary. I guess the run defense is playing really well, but I don't think our secondary is going to stay letting up yards like this, regardless of whether we brought Dean Pease in or not. Like, we're not that far away from playing good ball. So I think that the Dean Pease addition may just speed that progression up a little bit.
Yeah, and that's very well said. I agree with you. I think the Ravens defense is trending in the right direction. I know the points scored by the Bengals will lead others to believe otherwise, but there are things I saw on film that are easily fixed, and I think Dean Pease will help accelerate that process. I agree with you 100%. All right, let's take away from the Bengals game. We talked about that and move on to the Battle of the Beltway. Ravens and Commanders, two teams 45 minutes away from each other. I mean, it's Jaden Daniels versus Lamar Jackson. It's the 4-2 Commanders, 4-1 Commanders, I should say, against the 3-2 Ravens. What are your early thoughts about this game? Are you excited for it? Are you nervous about the potential of a breakdown, considering that the Bengals just threw up 38 points and the Commanders come in, giving, I think, perhaps the most points in the National Football League on offense?
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for the game. I think that the Commanders are playing exciting ball right now. Jaden Daniels is an exciting player. So it's definitely got a hype around it, and the Commanders haven't been good. So I think their fan base is just like super pumped and talking a lot of mess, so that's always exciting. Am I concerned like I was against the Bengals pass offense? No way, man. I don't see. I don't want to come across too confident. You know what I mean? You could let up a lot of yards. You never know. It's week to week league, but like just matchup based, just looking at the Commanders offense, what they like to do, like they really like to run the ball too. You know what I mean? They're getting Robinson and Eckler involved, and Jaden Daniels is running. What better offense for us to go against than that type of team that has a mobile quarterback that literally our defense has practiced all year through training camp and everything against it. It's the same style, and I don't think they really don't throw a ton. I don't think Jaden Daniels has thrown over 30 passes the entire year. So they like to run the ball and then just be efficient through the air. And I just feel like I love our matchup against our secondary versus their receivers. It's such a different matchup. It's kind of reminds me more of like the Buffalo matchup where I was feeling good about defending their receivers. Yeah, I was like, Keon Coleman and Shakir and these guys, like, they don't scare me. Like we can match up against that. Our corners are really good. It's just when we go against Chase and Higgins, I mean, they're in Devontae Adams, the Raiders game, like these guys are elite. And not to say our corners aren't really good, but like it's not Patrick Surtain, it's not Sauce. Like we're not able to just take those elite guys completely out of the game without more focused schemes. So when they create those one-on-one matchups, those elite receivers are winning those battles, and I just don't see the Commanders being able to create a ton of those. And I don't expect their running game to have a lot of success, so that's going to make them have to throw through the air a bit more, and I just feel like that's going to play into the Ravens' defense favor. So no, I think it's a completely different matchup than Cincinnati, and not saying we're going to blow them out, but like I'm pretty confident about this compared to last week.
Yeah, Ravens fans, Ryan knows ball, apparently, because he hit the nail on the head with that one. I agree with you. The offense of the Commanders, definitely has their positives, but they do play into the strengths of the Ravens defense. And even though the Ravens DB struggled, the Ravens defensive game plan against the Bengals were definitely bent for and don't break for 60 minutes. And I don't think the Ravens will take that approach. I expect the Ravens to take a approach that they took against the Bills and try and lock up those receivers. So I definitely agree with you completely 100%. I know it's early, but go ahead and give me one or two guys. If you're a Commanders fan watching, you would expect them to take a close look at as that game comes together.
I definitely keep your eyes on the interior of the defensive line. Travis Jones, especially, is the underrated name. I think that probably a lot of Commanders fans wouldn't know. You probably heard of Nnamdi Madubuike. But I think Travis Jones, that push, if you're just a guy who likes watching the trenches instead of the ball, at least here and there, I think you're going to be impressed with Travis Jones' strength on the defensive side of the ball. And then on offense, I feel like everyone knows a lot of people. Justice Hill, man. Watch out for Justice Hill. And us being able to change the pace with him. I think that we didn't do it a ton last week, but if we are running the ball consistently, I know the Commanders fans probably know who Justice Hill is, but I'm just trying to think of like underrated guys that they might not be thinking about as much. And I think that bringing in that change of pace back like Justice Hill is an interesting dynamic to our offense. He's got a lot of burst and quickness that we don't always get with a guy like Henry. I know he's got quickness and burst too, but it's a different style. And so I'll go with those two. I think that they're underrated players that maybe not everyone's talking about.
Yeah, and Justice Hill, the Commanders use Eckler a lot like the Ravens do with Hill. So I agree with you. The Ravens are in those third and short situations. Don't be surprised if Hill leaks out into the flat and they get some big yardage on Yak. So I like those two picks for sure. Travis Jones, obviously, if you're not a Ravens fan, you might not know him, but he is a force in the middle of that defense. So pairing him with Nnamdi Madubuike, like you said, is definitely a luxury that the Ravens do have. All right, I don't want to ask you to give predictions for the game because I know you have your own show and you want to do that yourself.
You're good.
But I will. Okay, well, go ahead. Give me a prediction.
Bro.
Give me a score prediction. Let the world know what you think.
Okay, I am going Ravens 34, Commanders 24.
Oh, I like that.
So not a blowout. I think that it can stay close for a little bit, or I could see the Ravens actually getting out to a little bit of a hot start, but I think the Commanders will fight back. They're definitely impressive, man. Like I want to give them credit. I don't want to just act like we are going to dominate this team and this is a great matchup for us. I do think it is a great matchup for us compared to last week, but the Commanders are a threat too. I think that the Ravens, this really does play into their favor. We have a strong run defense, and I don't expect them to run the ball with ease, which is going to cause a lot of problems because I don't think that they're just going to be able to air it out a ton. Like I said, Jaden Daniels hasn't even thrown over 30 passes all year long. And if you're not able to run the ball, you're going to have to start pushing it down the field. Not that he's not capable of being accurate or anything. I just don't think that these receivers are going to be able to get a lot of separation. And I think the Ravens offense is clicking on all cylinders, whether they want to stack the box and try and slow the run down. I don't even think they do stack the box a ton though, but maybe they'll, so maybe they'll change their game plan. I went into Cincinnati thinking that we would be able to run on them a little bit too, and then they sold out to stop the run. So if the Commanders want to do something like that, then we can obviously be multiple and push the ball through the air. So I got the Ravens offense scoring over 30. I think we're rolling right now, and the Commanders defense is not an elite defense that I think can stop us. So I think Ravens score 34, and I'll give the Commanders 24.
That's a good prediction. I'm not too far away from that. I'll give my predictions at the end of the show, but definitely mirroring your thought process when it comes to this matchup. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Tell the folks at home where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. You can just look up the Flock Rundown on Twitter, X, or YouTube.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll have your link in the description, all in the bottom of this YouTube page. And if you're on Spotify, head over to YouTube.
Oh, yeah, Spotify and Spotify and Apple too. All that Flock Rundown everywhere. Yeah, I forgot.
Don't sell yourself short.
No, I just went on audio like 2 months ago, and I've had the YouTube channel for a lot longer, so I don't always think to talk about the audio. But yeah, Flock Rundown, man.
Yeah, get your fan base everywhere. Hit them on all cylinders. So thanks so much, Ryan, for joining us. It's been great. When we come back, we'll get final thoughts on the matchup between the Ravens and the Commanders next on Ravens Talk. Welcome back to Ravens Talk. Again, that was Ryan from the Flock Rundown. Great guest. Definitely knew his stuff. Seems that he was speaking almost verbatim to what I was saying on the show early on. So great to have a guy who knows his Ravens knowledge, knows his football stuff, being able to decipher what the game plan potentially could be and his thoughts on the matchups. Great to have him on. And if you're a fan of the Ravens, obviously you probably know who he is already. But if you don't, and you're watching on YouTube, link to his work will be in the description. If you're on Spotify or Apple, make sure you go on to YouTube and check out his stuff. He's also available on Apple and Spotify, as he mentioned. So great to have Ryan on, and we'll definitely have him on again. But Ryan talked about it, and let's finish it up here. Ravens versus Commanders, definitely a great time to be a football fan if you're in the DMV. Obviously, Baltimore isn't part of the DMV. I mean, I agree with that. Baltimore is Baltimore. The DMV is the rest of you guys. We are a tier of our own. So we don't want to be lumped in with you guys. But if you're in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area, Washington, D.C., whatever, then you're talking Ravens and Commanders, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Gladys in Baltimore, not really a fan of FedEx Field or whatever they call their stadium over there. Definitely janky over there, for lack of a better term. But M&T Bank Stadium should be rocking. This should be a primetime game for sure. Do not know why the NFL decided to have this at 1 p.m. I know CBS tried to lock this up because they were very aware. And this is a matchup between two young QBs, one of Lamar Jackson, who's a two-time MVP, and one of Jaden Daniels, who looks to be every bit the guy we saw him when he was in LSU. So it should be a great matchup. Ryan gave his prediction. I'll give mine. I think the Ravens win. I mean, no surprise. I mean, based on my matchups, it just doesn't seem like the Commanders are at the level of the Ravens yet. Could change. Could prove me wrong. It's any given Sunday, but the matchups lean heavily towards the Ravens winning this one. Of course, if the DBs don't come to play, we could have another shootout. I just don't see that happening. I don't see it happening. Give me 31-20. 31-20 win for the Ravens. In fact, that's being a coward. 31-17, 14-point win for the Ravens. Get the job done. They move to 4-2 in the AFC North. We'll see if it happens. Of course, then they'll be tied with the Commanders, who will fall in 4-2. Different conferences, but still lots of opportunity for the Commanders to enjoy their team. They're just not built to stop the Ravens. And as many mentioned to me on social media, who is built to stop this Ravens offense? We'll see. Somebody will show up. Until then, we'll get ready for the games. That's going to do it for here. Ravens Talk. Big game coming up. Big win for the Ravens in week 5. We'll see if week 6 has some more magic in store for Ravens fans. We'll see how it goes. Commanders fans, don't be too upset with me for my prediction. I think the Commanders are a great team. It's just a dog from the Ravens. We talked about it in the offseason. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry together. It's tough when they're firing on cylinders. So We'll see what happens. We'll talk about it next week, regardless of the outcome. Stay tuned for that. We'll see you next week.